Hello everyone. I'm Bob Ackerman, the editor-in-chief of Signal Magazine, welcoming you to this Signal executive video. Joining me in today's discussion is Kirk Spring, president of SafeNet Assured Technologies. Kirk has been with SafeNet AT since its inception in January 2015. Prior to that, he spent 14 years with SafeNet Incorporated, rising to the position of vice president of technology in the company's CTO office. Throughout his career, Kirk has worked on leading-edge data security technologies for government customers, especially in the Defense Department. Kirk, welcome to Signal.
Thank you for having me here.
These days, everyone is moving to the cloud. Accordingly, the cloud is changing to suit its disparate customers. We now have private, hybrid, public, and multi-cloud environments. What are the security challenges presented by these different cloud environments, and how do you meet them?
Well, you're correct. The customer is moving to the cloud, and the multi-facets of the different variations, private, hybrid, and as you said, public clouds, and even multi-cloud vendor providers, is really giving a challenge to the customer. So, because the use cases vary depending on which cloud they're going to and which cloud model they're going to use. So we'll take, for instance, private cloud. Private cloud we're seeing being used by the government customers, mainly for high levels of data that are very sensitive, right? Where they don't want to push a lot of stuff out into a public cloud. They want to be able to control access control, who the user community is that's accessing the cloud, as well as being able to control their data and the life cycle of that data. Hybrid clouds, of course, is a mixture of the enterprise systems they already have in today, with a hybrid model going out to a public cloud, or a C2S cloud, which is AWS's Intel version. In that instance, it kind of gets mixed because they can use security services in the cloud, yet they're still very cognizant of the issues with enterprise security and how they have basically a seamless management of their security between enterprise and the cloud that they're going into. And then the public cloud version, people are really trusting that the cloud providers, the CSP, the service providers, are going to provide services that ensure that their data integrity, both confidentiality, as well as their access control, is being controlled within that cloud. That public cloud really is probably the most challenging for securities because it's pretty much an open cloud. You have multiple users on it. It's kind of a multi-tenancy cloud environment at that point. One good example, I would say, is last November, it was disclosed that the Army had some storage of data in S3 buckets, and I think the person, Chris Vickery, was able to find these buckets and actually access them because the configuration of the storage buckets hadn't been done correctly, right? And it was a public cloud, so therefore he was able to access it as being a public cloud and be able to get to that data. So really it's the bringing people up to speed on the security aspects of the cloud, what the do and don'ts are, what good security hygiene and what good security practices are for the cloud for the different use cases. So SafeNet AT, we believe that the hybrid cloud is going to be one of the most dominant clouds within the federal government because the federal agencies are seeing that there's a need still to control some data within their enterprise, yet take the advantages of the services and the data storage capabilities and the scalability of the cloud to meet a lot of their high data demands and high processing demands.
Let's look at the hybrid cloud. By definition, it's hybrid, so conventional methods don't necessarily fit. How do you adjust for that?
So what we do is we look at it holistically for the enterprise and the cloud as a whole. So our goal is to extend their enterprise security out into the cloud. So what that means is a couple of things. One is the ability to encrypt the data before it gets to the cloud, or to support any of the cloud encryption services that cloud service providers offer so that business applications can run in the cloud and access the data, but still be able to allow the user to manage their keys for that encryption as an enterprise key management aspect. So one good example is if you encrypt your data and your data is resident in S3 buckets or an Azure data blob bucket, the last thing you really want to do is store your keys in the same infrastructure or at the same place, right? So to keep the keys separate from the data, that way if the data is compromised or they have a internal breach, which as we know, it's not a matter of if you're going to get breached. It's a matter of when you're going to get breached. Then the keys are separate, and you've managed those keys. It also really allows the users to go to a multi-cloud environment. So if you're using a key management service by a CSP, a cloud provider, you're really tied into their services. It's not like you can move those keys and use those keys in another cloud provider's environment. Going with a hybrid model and having your own key management from an enterprise standpoint allows you to put your data in multiple cloud providers, infrastructures, and still access them and still manage the key life cycle for those keys.
As the hybrid cloud evolves, and it's almost a certainty it will evolve like everything else we have in that arena these days, how do you evolve the security for it?
So as it evolves, dynamically what we do is we look at the key management devices in our encryption products, and we look at the use cases and basically the threat vectors, right? So that's all about the data security, and that's basically what we do. And we look at the threat vectors and how they grow. So if you look at the original movement to the cloud, at enterprise, the federal users looked at their enterprise system, and in the old days they did perimeter protection. And then as they found out that that wasn't good enough, they started doing a lot of monitoring and detection systems, right, to be able to detect breaches on their data systems, and encryption within the enterprise. But as they moved to the cloud, they found the need to do the same thing now and push those enterprise services out into the cloud in the hybrid model. So as we look at that, the threat vectors expand quite a bit with the cloud. That's the one thing that's interesting. Not only do you have to worry about the threat vectors within your enterprise now you have to look at the cloud as itself and figure out what are your new threat vectors. You have new insider threats, right? There's more people that are managing infrastructure, and it's not your people. And then you have to have really good access control and authentication on those accesses for those cloud services. So we look at it as it expands, and as the services expand, we try to identify all the new vectors that are there and then address those with the different use cases that our products can address.
What does the future hold for the hybrid cloud and the threat, both of which are changing, and of course those changes will challenge security measures?
Yes, they will. It's ever-growing threats, and as the cloud providers provide new services and they expand the capabilities of the cloud, and not only that, but the federal agencies, they expand the capabilities of their enterprises and the services they need, and now we're throwing a third factor, the Internet of Things, right? So now you get to the Internet of Things, and Internet of Things, obviously, whether for the federal agency, say it's Army, and to them that's every sensor they put out in the field, right? Needs access back to the cloud service. So I think it's well known that they're going to be collecting a lot of data and big data, and they run a lot of analytics on it. So now it's not a factor of managing just the security of your cloud, but also the security of the IoT devices. And really having a scalable solution that the services can use and scale as time grows, because we know, project it could go from 1 million endpoints to 40 million endpoints in just a short time, just as we've seen the explosion with the cloud environments.
Where do you think we're headed in terms of cloud exploitation and exploration?
My opinion is we haven't seen the start of the cloud exploitation. So I think there's been a few instances where we've seen people that have been getting into cloud environments. I listed one and found data that was actually available. I think the growing curve for the user community is going to have to be accelerated, and that's a lot around training that's being planned right now for the user community. And that is on, again, like I said, good security hygiene, good security practices, how they implement their security infrastructure, and really assessing. One thing they need to do is assess their assets, and that is look at the assets they have, figure out what the level of that asset is, and really a risk assessment framework around those assets to figure out what type of protection is needed around that. But as they do that, of course, they've got to reassess, right? And probably reassess annually, because the threats will just grow. And as we know, the bad actors, they get smarter and smarter every day as these systems are out there longer and longer, right? So it's going to be an ongoing process, and I think it'll be interesting times in the next 2 to 3 years on the growth of the security products that are going to be protecting the cloud environments, as well as the federal agencies and how they address these risk management frameworks that they're going to have to put in place.
Well, Kirk, thank you very much for appearing in Signal's executive video. If you have any questions for Kirk or queries about SafeNet AT, please email them to info@safenetat.com or visit the website at www.safenetat.com. I'm Bob Ackerman. Thank you for watching and have a good day.